Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Shanna Fold.
In our top story, Israel has been ranked first in the listing of COVID-19 health safety countries by the Deep Knowledge Group. That's an association of commercial and nonprofit organizations. The United States placed 27th. Top honors for the treatment efficiency went to Singapore. Israel finished 9th in that category. And to no one's surprise, Italy was listed first among countries with the greatest risk level. Israel's #1 safety ranking is due in large part to quick action taken by the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the early stages of the outbreak of the disease. The Israeli premier was one of the first world leaders to issue strict guidelines regarding social distancing and public behavior.
Israeli scientists are said to be just days away from completing the production of the active component of a coronavirus vaccine, and it could be tested on humans by the 1st of June. However, it must first go through regulatory processes. Dr. Chen Katz, head of Migal's biotechnology group, told the Jerusalem Post that human trials using an oral vaccine would be first conducted on young, healthy individuals and then would likely expand to the general population. And in a related matter, Israel's Magen David Adom National Emergency Service will begin testing coronavirus patients with a new passive vaccine created from plasma donated by individuals who've recovered from the virus. Professor Eilat Shinar, the deputy director of the blood services, said it's believed that those who have recovered from COVID-19 have developed special antivirus proteins or antibodies in their plasma that could help patients fight off the disease.
The Israeli army is not exactly beating its swords into plowshares. The IDF has gone to war against the coronavirus. Colonel Udi Amira, commander of the Army's Rehabilitation and Maintenance Center, said that in 12 hours, his soldiers went from making seats for tanks to producing 1,400 protective goggles a day for medical personnel. A factory in Haifa is now refitting ambulances to provide enhanced safety measures against the virus for crews manning those emergency vehicles. And not to be outdone, the Defense Ministry has joined forces with the Israel Aerospace Industries and medical device maker Innovatech to transform a missile production facility into a factory that will mass produce ventilators to offset a shortage of those life-saving machines.
People of faith are weighing in on the coronavirus pandemic. A poll commissioned by the Joshua Fund reveals that 44% of Americans think the deadly disease is a wake-up call to turn back to faith in God. And nearly 1/3 of those questioned believe this plague sweeping the globe is connected to the last days predicted in the Bible. The Pew Research Center also conducted a survey. The results there find that more than half of American adults have prayed for an end to the coronavirus outbreak. 15% of those who say they never pray confess that they've turned to prayer. And 24% of respondents who describe themselves as not belonging to any religion said they too are praying for help from above.
Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar threatened that if ventilators are not brought to Gaza, then his terror group will take them by force from Israel and stop the breathing of 6 million Israelis. The World Health Organization revealed that the overwhelming majority of ventilators in the Palestinian Authority and Gaza are being used by patients with conditions unrelated to the highly contagious coronavirus. However, the ventilator crisis is apparently a matter of priorities. The Palestinian Media Watch revealed that the amount of money the Palestinian Authority paid to terrorists last month could have purchased 465 of the life-saving breathing machines and nearly 400,000 coronavirus test kits. Nevertheless, PA Prime Minister Mohammed Shataya made it clear that their pay-to-slay program will not be cut. The Arab official said monthly salaries would go first to medical personnel and PA security forces. Then, prisoners and families of so-called martyrs who died while carrying out terrorist attacks would receive their paychecks, even before welfare cases, the poor, and teachers.
In other terror-related news, outrage was quick in coming following the decision by a Pakistani court to commute the death sentence of Omar Saeed Sheikh, a British national convicted of killing Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl. The court chose instead to sentence Sheikh to 7 years in prison for kidnapping. He has already spent 18 years behind bars and will remain incarcerated for at least 3 more months. But critics of the court's decision expressed concern that Sheikh could be freed following the interim period. The court also acquitted 3 other alleged co-conspirators. Pearl's father, Judea, called the ruling a mockery of justice. A U.S. State Department official said it was an affront to victims of terrorism everywhere. And the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations said it would be an outrage to let the barbaric killers go free.
Israeli border police arrested 2 Arabs in a village near Ramallah on suspicion of involvement in several recent incidents. One of those taken into custody was Omar Barghouti. He's the father of a terrorist responsible for 2 deadly attacks against Israeli soldiers and civilians in 2018. The elder Barghouti is a senior member of Hamas. He spent nearly 4 decades in Israeli prisons for security-related crimes, including murder. His 2 sons, Assam and Saleh, wounded 7 Israelis at the Ofra Junction. A baby born prematurely as a result of that attack died 3 days later. That same week, Assam struck again, killing 2 IDF soldiers and wounding 2 other people, including a female civilian. He was arrested by security forces following a month-long manhunt. His brother Saleh was shot dead while resisting arrest.
In regional news, United States President Donald Trump, never one to mince words, warned Iran that it would pay a heavy price if it or its proxy allies attacked U.S. troops deployed in Iraq. Trump said the U.S. did not want to increase hostility, but if Tehran initiated hostile actions against American soldiers, Iran would regret it like they've never regretted anything before. The president vowed that the hardline Islamic State would pay a heavy price if it launched a sneak attack on U.S. troops or assets in Iraq.
A Hezbollah commander has been assassinated in southern Lebanon. The bullet-riddled body of Ali Mohammed Yunus was found beside his car. Authorities said that he had also been stabbed several times. A suspect in the killing has been arrested. Yunus's job in the terrorist organization was to pursue spies and collaborators. He was also reported to be a close associate of former Iranian Revolutionary Guards commander Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in a U.S. airstrike earlier this year.
Corbyns out, Starmer's in. Britain's main opposition party has tabbed pro-European centrist Keir Starmer to head the Labour Party, which suffered a humiliating defeat in last December's election. Former Labour boss Jeremy Corbyn was condemned for his failure to deal with the rampant anti-Semitism infecting the party. 57-year-old Starmer apologized for the grief the issue had brought the Jewish communities and pledged to stamp out what he called the stain of anti-Semitism. He said his wife, Victoria Alexander, comes from a Jewish background and even has relatives living in Tel Aviv. The new Labour Party leader told the Jewish News that he absolutely supports Zionism without qualification, as well as the right of Israel to exist as a homeland for the Jewish people. Israeli Foreign Minister Yisrael Katz congratulated Starmer on his victory and says he hopes he would work to strengthen the friendship between Britain and Israel.
The coronavirus pandemic has resulted in many tragic stories around the world. Israel is no exception. One such case is that of Tamar Levy Peretz. The 49-year-old resident of Lod was the 18th Israeli to die of the disease. Tamar and her husband Shimon had tried for many years to have children. 4 years ago, they were blessed with twins. Sadly, the father died of a heart attack 7 months after their birth. And last month, the children's mother, Tamar, succumbed to the coronavirus. When news of her death was reported, a special account was created for the twin 4-year-old orphans. Israelis opened their hearts and their pocketbooks, and within a matter of days had donated more than 2 million shekels to the fund.
The Holy Fire ceremony in Jerusalem is one of the Orthodox Christian community's most ancient and mysterious rituals. Thousands of worshipers fill the Church of the Holy Sepulchre for the pre-Easter observance, which falls on April 18th this year. However, due to a ban on large gatherings because of coronavirus, the ceremony will be limited to no more than 10 religious leaders from various Orthodox Christian denominations. 2 clerics enter the small chamber, marking the site which tradition says is the tomb of Jesus Christ. They exit with burning candles said to be miraculously lit with holy fire as a message to the faithful. The flame, whose source is a closely guarded secret, is normally shared with candle-holding pilgrims and even sent out in special containers to Christian communities around the globe.
Hebrew University professor Yinon Ben Neria has been awarded a €3.2 million grant by the European Research Council for what the ERC calls groundbreaking and high-risk projects. Competition is steep for the grants that are only given to researchers with a proven track record of significant achievements. Ben Neria from Hebrew U's Faculty of Medicine is conducting research to develop an oncodestroyer to treat adult acute leukemias.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is the President and CEO of Bridges for Peace, Rebecca Brimmer. Rebecca, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here with you, Josh.
So tell us a little about what is Bridges for Peace.
So Bridges for Peace is a Christian organization that is supporting Israel and building relationships between Christians and Jews all over the world.
But Bridges for Peace has been here for many years. What led to the establishment of it?
So our founder moved here in 1964. He was an educator, and he wanted Christians to understand their Bible not from the 2,000 years of theology, but from the land itself, from the language itself, from the book itself. And so that's how we started. We started as an educational organization, something that still runs very deeply in our DNA.
So why should Christians stand with Israel?
Well, I could give you a lot of reasons, but I think one of the most important and compelling to me is that the Bible says that we should. And I'm a Bible-believing Christian. I'm a person of faith. I not only believe the Bible, but I believe in the God of Israel. And when he says that I'm supposed to do something, well, I think I need to pay attention to that. Of course, as a Christian, Christians, we believe in Jesus, and he also lived here, and he came to the house of Israel. It's important to him. When he was asked what's the most important thing, he said, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God. So for me, from every angle I look at from my faith, it's important. Of course, historically, it's also important because Christians cause so much untold pain to the Jewish people, and I can't change that. But hey, I want to do everything I can to change the future.
Bridges for Peace is involved in many projects in the land, but probably your flagship project is the food bank. You give away more food than any other organization. Why is that so important to be involved in that work?
In looking at ways to build relationships between the Christian and Jewish world, we realized in the Christian world we need to educate them. But in the Jewish world, we needed to do practical acts showing kindness, showing a different heart. And so a number of years ago, actually more than 20 years ago, maybe almost 30 years ago now, we got a grant to start a food bank. And that's how it started. And we've given away many, many, many tons of food. Every year we're giving away tons of food. In fact, 22,140 people are getting food from us every month. And they're in communities all over Israel. And what's important to me is that they know that that food comes from donations from Christians all over the world. Christians who care about the survival of Israel. Christians who care about them, who believe that God has a plan and a purpose for them today. They're not forgotten by God. And so people don't dig in their pockets and get out money unless they believe something.
You know, you're also very much involved in Aliyah, the moving of Jews to Israel, work with Keren HaYesod. Why is that an important thing for Christians to be involved with?
Again, it all boils down to what kind of Christians. If you're a Christian that believes the Bible, then you can't read the prophets of Israel without knowing that it's something that's important to God. Almost every one of them talks about, yes, there's going to be a dispersion, and yes, I'm going to disperse you because of your sin. But all of them say, but you're going to come back. And so we feel like, as Christians that believe the Bible and read the Bible, we feel like if we can partner with that, why, we're partnering with the Almighty. What could be more special? What could be more wonderful? So we've helped people come back now for a number of years. About 80,000 have received help from Bridges for Peace to come back. And then once they come, we greet them with welcome gifts, pots and pans for their kitchen and blankets and so on, and help them with food for at least the year or two that they're really at risk.
You know, you don't just get involved with projects, but you're also involved with advocacy. You're a global partner of the Israel Allies Foundation. You write every 2 weeks, I believe, the Dispatch from Jerusalem. Why is it so important to get the real news and the message of Israel out to the world?
You know, Josh, it's a thing that maybe it's not bias, but the world does not tell the good news of Israel. The world tells what's going wrong. And I think that's true of news in general. You know, if you get a medal for something, it maybe gets on your local news, but it doesn't go around the world. So we realize that most of the world only hears bad things about Israel. Most of the world only sees the negative pictures, strong soldiers against little kids throwing rocks, etc. And we realized that we had the opportunity to change that picture for the Christians that are involved with us. And so 25,000 receive our monthly publications, and of course many, many more than that are on our website, because we want to change the narrative. We want to tell Israel's good story.
The world is going through a pretty rough time right now. Do you think that Christians are going to continue to answer the call when it comes to Israel, or is it every man for himself?
My heart is that Christians will cling more closely to their beliefs and to the Bible and to the God that they trust, which of course is the God of the Bible, the God of the Jewish people, our shared book. So I believe that Christians will step up and continue to support Israel, but I certainly am not a mind reader. I can't tell you the future. I just am putting my trust in the Holy One of Israel.
You've been involved in faith-based diplomacy for many, many years. What have you seen as a change on the ground in Israel? How are Israelis reacting to Christian support?
Well, I can tell you that I think a watershed moment is the start of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus. And you know, you and I were discussing those things even before it ever started. And I see a difference in how the average Israeli approaches the average Christian since that happened. What is it, 14 years ago now? 15
16
years?
now.
16, okay, time flies. So I can remember very clearly just holding myself intact when a Jewish person, an Israeli person would understand that I was a Christian, because I almost always got a negative response. But that all changed in the past 15, 16 years as publicity got out about all the good will that Christians have toward Israel, all the things that we are doing to help in the Aliyah process, the bringing of the Jewish people home, and to helping people survive, and in fighting BDS and so on. So I think there's a big change, and I'm really proud of the fact that my organization has had even a part in that.
Rebecca, there are literally tens of millions of people watching the show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
So I just want to say to you, as Christians around the world, that you don't have to be afraid of what's happening in the world, that we have a God that is bigger than anything that's happening. Right now, in every food parcel that we give out, we're putting in a bookmark. And it says in Hebrew on one side, in English on the other side, it's Psalm 91, one of the most wonderful Psalms, and it's God's antidote to fear. 3 times in it, it says we don't have to be afraid of the pestilence or the plague. So I want to encourage you that you don't have to be afraid. Put your trust in the God of Israel. Continue to bless Israel, because he says in his word that he will bless you when you do so.
Thank you, Rebecca, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom, and welcome to the Return to Zion with Keren HaYesod. I'm Sam Grundberg, World Chairman of Keren HaYesod, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. We live in a time where the God of Israel is fulfilling His prophecies right before our very eyes. Join us as we work together to defend the covenant.
Those who dreamed about the Jewish state, those who survived the Holocaust and found in Israel the anchor, the security, those who wrought the historical miracle and against all odds established a state, those who stepped into the breach and defended the young Jewish state, so many of them paid with their lives, those who arrived in the homeland to their new home, those who propelled Israel forward step after step, those who stand at the technological vanguard, and the loyal partners who ensure the continuation of the Zionist enterprise. All those are Keren HaYesod, because Keren HaYesod is Eretz Israel. The return of an ancient people to their biblical homeland, a nation whose values inspired mankind, only to endure centuries of suffering. The ultimate tale of redemption from the ashes of destruction. This remarkable story is the story of the State of Israel. It is also the story of Keren HaYesod. Thanks to the dedication of Keren HaYesod supporters, huge resources were available to make the State of Israel a reality. Founded in 1920, Keren HaYesod galvanized Jewish donors across the world in a unified effort to develop the infrastructure of the first sovereign Jewish state in 2,000 years.
אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל. היא מדינת ישראל.
By the time the State of Israel was born in 1948, Keren HaYesod's funds had been the driving force behind the establishment of over 900 communities in the Jewish homeland. Its donors helped found many of the iconic institutions we know today, including the Hebrew University and Israel's Philharmonic Orchestra, ensuring that as Zechariah envisioned, Jerusalem's streets would once more be filled with boys and girls at play. Keren HaYesod's supporters also helped rescue tens of thousands of desperate Jews fleeing a burning Europe, bringing them to the sanctuary of the land of Israel. Ezekiel's prophecy of bringing dry bones to life had been fulfilled. Throughout the decades, Keren HaYesod has been there for Jewish people coming home. In the 1950s, by financing the creation of still vibrant cities, Eilat and Sderot, bringing to life Ben-Gurion's vision of making the Negev desert bloom. In the 1960s and 70s, raising funds and providing a lifeline for the country's development during wartime. And at the close of the century, helping to bring immigrants from the four corners of the earth in a modern-day exodus, rescuing tens of thousands of Jews from Ethiopia and 1 million Jews from the former Soviet Union, delivering them from danger and distress. To this day, Keren HaYesod's activists continue their mission of aliyah and absorption. Last year, more than 31,000 Jews were helped to make their lives in the land of their ancestors. Keren HaYesod remains at the heart of Israel's development, as Israel's barren land has been transformed into a hub of creativity, innovation, and success. Keren HaYesod supporters have been there every step of the way. They have empowered 2,000 pioneering young Israelis to reinvigorate 65 distressed communities. All of this has been achieved through Keren HaYesod's ongoing efforts to build unbreakable bonds with Israel among Jews in the diaspora, Christians, and people of faith from across the world. In the book of Jeremiah, the Lord says, "There is a hope for your future. Your children will return to their borders." Every day, Keren HaYesod supporters are making this vision a reality. Thanks to Keren HaYesod, the State of Israel continues to grow from strength to strength.
Let's bless Israel together.
Now's the time for you to get involved. Assist Keren HaYesod to raise the necessary funds in order to bring Jews yearning for their homeland back to Israel. Your donation can help fulfill the biblical prophecy today. To donate and get information, visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
Shalom to all the Jews around the world and to all the Israeli Anglos. I'm Naftali Bennett, Minister of Defense of Israel. We're nearing Passover, the Passover Seder Pesach, as we all know. It's mostly a family event, a beautiful event. I want to start with the bottom line. This year, all Jews around the world do the Pesach Seder in the very nuclear family. You do not do it this year with grandma and grandpa. There will be no Seder Pesachs with young people and old people together, because that's the single most lethal combination. We love our mothers and fathers. Kabedet avicha vetimecha. I'll tell you what I'm going to do and what we're going to do, and this is my recommendation. A few hours before the Passover enters, on Passover Eve, at about 2 or 3 p.m., we're going to do a conference Seder with my mother in Haifa. I live in Ra'anana with my brother in England. And we're going to do the full Seder just a few hours before and enjoy the family event. And then when Pesach comes in, we're all going to do a quick, shorter Seder, the official one. That's my recommendation, but everyone can do whatever you want. But I forbid every Jew in the world to do a Passover Seder with grandma and grandpa. Even if you think you can isolate them from doing it from 20 feet away, you can't. They will get the coronavirus. There's no way to have a 2 or 3 hour Seder without your mother and father getting the virus, and it is lethal. So since we love our grandma and grandpa, we're going to do the Seder Pesach from far away. Happy Pesach.
The biblical prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes. The people of Israel are returning to the Promised Land after 2,000 years of exile. But millions of Jews are still longing to come home. Bless Israel by supporting Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Together, we can fulfill the prophecy of the Bible.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Shanna Fold, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.